Imagine being alone in the middle of a dark forest. The sun has set, the cold is creeping in, and every sound makes your heart pound harder. The trees stretch endlessly, shadows twist into shapes, and there's no road, no signal, no way out. You're tired, hungry, scared. You start to wonder, is this how it ends? That was me, a woman lost, with nothing but fear as my companion. I had no map, no light, and no strength left to keep walking. Every step felt like the forest was swallowing me whole. And then, something appeared. At first, I thought it was a trick of the darkness, a shape moving through the trees, but then I heard it, the steady rhythm of hooves on the ground. A horse. Why was it here? Was I hallucinating, or was it real? All I knew was that this horse was watching me, waiting, guiding me with silent eyes as if it already knew my fate. And from that moment on, my survival depended on following him.
Where truth meets imagination. Welcome to Facts and Fiction.
I thought I was only hiking for a few hours, but by nightfall, I realized I was lost. Hi, my name is Margaret Evans, and I was 47 years old the summer I decided to wander off into the woods alone. Most people, if you told them that detail, 47, divorced, 2 grown children, career behind me, and a body not quite as strong as it used to be, would probably shake their heads and say, what was she thinking, heading into the wilderness by herself? But that's the thing. I wasn't thinking the way most people would. I wasn't planning it as an adventure, or a test of courage, or even some midlife crisis thrill. I was planning it as an escape. For months leading up to that day, life had felt like it was collapsing inward. My marriage had ended 5 years earlier, but the cracks from it still lived in me, little fractures of trust and self-worth. My children, bless them, were grown and gone, busy carving out their own lives. I was proud, but I was also forgotten. And then there was my career. 20 years at a corporate desk, grinding through marketing campaigns and board meetings, only to be told one afternoon that my position was being restructured. That's corporate talk for you're no longer needed. So there I was, divorced, unemployed, and sitting in an empty house that echoed with silence. Nights were the worst. Sometimes I would sit on the back porch, staring at the woods behind my house, and think, I'm invisible. Nobody would even notice if I disappeared. That was the seed, the thought of disappearing, not forever, but just long enough to remember who I was, without all the noise of life. One morning, I woke up, poured myself a cup of coffee, and looked at the hiking trail map I had tacked onto the fridge years ago. It showed the Appalachian foothills stretching just 2 hours from where I lived in North Carolina. I had always told myself I'd hike there someday. Someday had become a joke. But that morning, I folded the map into my pocket like a secret, and I knew my someday was today.
I didn't tell anyone, not my children, not my neighbors, not even my sister, who called every few weeks to check in. Part of me knew it was reckless. Another part of me craved the recklessness. For once in my life, I wanted to do something not because it was responsible or expected, but because it called me. I packed light, a small backpack with 2 bottles of water, a couple of granola bars, a flashlight, my phone, and a paperback book that I never ended up reading. I told myself it was just a few hours of walking, out by noon, back by evening. The drive there was almost too easy. The sky was clear, the summer air thick but not unbearable, and the road wound through green hills that reminded me of childhood road trips. I remember feeling a mix of nerves and exhilaration, like I was sneaking out of my own life. When I arrived at the trailhead, there were only 3 other cars in the dirt lot. I parked my old Toyota, slung the backpack over my shoulders, and stood there for a moment staring at the mouth of the trail. It looked like any other forest path, quiet, shaded, inviting. I had no idea that once I stepped onto it, I was stepping into one of the most terrifying and transformative experiences of my life. I started walking. The crunch of gravel under my boots was steady, almost comforting. The forest greeted me with a hush, as if it were sizing me up, deciding whether I belonged. Shafts of light pierced through the canopy, painting the ground in patches of gold. I felt my lungs fill deeper with air than they had in months. For the first mile or two, I felt good. My body loosened with each step, and my mind started to quiet. I remember thinking, maybe this was exactly what I needed. Not therapy, not medication, just this. I paused at a stream to drink some water and watched a pair of dragonflies dance over the ripples. For the first time in years, I smiled without forcing it. But even then, in the back of my mind, a whisper stirred. Don't get too comfortable. You're alone out here. One mistake, and it could all go wrong.
I brushed it aside and kept walking. The trail forked about 3 miles in. The sign was faded, one arrow pointing toward Raven Rock Lookout and the other toward Pine Hollow Loop. I remembered the map, vaguely. Pine Hollow was supposed to be a loop that circled back toward the parking lot. Easy enough. I chose Pine Hollow. The forest deepened as I moved forward. The trees grew taller, their branches weaving together into a ceiling that let in only slivers of light. The ground was softer here, carpeted with pine needles. The air smelled sharper, tinged with sap and earth. I walked slower, listening. There was a quiet I hadn't known in years. No car horns, no chatter, no buzzing phone notifications, just birdsong, the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush, and my own breathing. As the hours passed, I thought about my life, about how I'd spent decades building an identity that crumbled so quickly, about the way loneliness felt heavier than fear sometimes, and about how, maybe, just maybe, the forest could teach me something I'd forgotten. I sat on a fallen log, ate half a granola bar, and pulled out my phone. No signal. The little icon mocked me with a single bar that blinked and vanished. I told myself it didn't matter. I wasn't here to be connected. What I didn't know was that it would matter, sooner than I could imagine, because that was the day I walked farther than I should have, past the point of familiar trails, and to a part of the woods where the trees grew so thick the sunlight struggled to find me. That was the day I thought I was escaping my problems, but instead, I stumbled into something much bigger, something that would nearly break me, and something that would save me. But that, well, that's for part 2.
If part 1 of this story was about the decision, part 2 is where the forest really began to swallow me whole. The trail twisted ahead of me like a ribbon, winding deeper into a green world that seemed endless. At first, I felt energized, even proud of myself. My boots crunched along the pine needle carpet, my breathing steady. I was doing it. I was out here, walking alone, living in the moment. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a failure. I felt alive. The Pine Hollow Loop, at least on the old map in my memory, was supposed to be 4 miles. A loop trail, simple in design. Start at one point, circle around, and come right back to where you began. But trails don't always look like maps, and maps don't always look like reality. I followed the markers nailed to the trees, small squares of faded paint,
blue on some trunks, green on others. The problem was, some markers had peeled, some were hidden by vines, and some were simply gone. Around an hour in, I realized I hadn't seen another hiker, not one. The lot had a few cars, but maybe they had gone toward Raven Rock. Pine Hollow was mine alone. The silence pressed in. Birds sang, yes, but there was no human noise. No laughter, no chatter, no crunch of boots behind me, just me and the forest. At first, it was peaceful. I even whispered to myself, "This is exactly what you needed, Margaret, just you and the trees." But the further I went, the heavier the quiet became. It's funny, most people dream of quiet, but too much of it? It starts to feel like a weight. Every twig snap behind me made me whirl around. Every gust of wind that rattled the leaves sent my pulse spiking.
By midday, I figured I should be halfway through the loop. My water bottle was half empty, and I decided to take a break. I found a fallen log, pulled off my backpack, and sat. That's when I realized something was wrong. I pulled out my phone, not for a call since I knew I didn't have signal, but for the time. 12:47 p.m. I'd been walking for nearly 3 hours. That meant, even at my slow pace, I should have been nearing the turn back toward the parking lot, but the trail showed no sign of a looping. It kept winding forward, deeper, always deeper. A tremor of unease rippled through me. I shoved it down. Maybe I was slower than I thought. Maybe the loop was longer. Maybe the map in my head was wrong. "Keep walking," I muttered aloud, just to hear a voice, any voice. So I did. The trees thickened, the light dimmed, shafts of sun fell less often, and the air cooled in a way that felt less like shade and more like warning. I walked another half hour. No signs, no forks, just the same endless trees. When the trail narrowed between two mossy boulders, I thought I caught movement in the corner of my eye. My chest clenched, heart kicking against my ribs, but it was only a deer. A young doe, frozen in place, watching me with wide brown eyes. She flicked her ears, then bounded away soundlessly. I exhaled a laugh, shaky but real. "You nearly gave me a heart attack, sweetheart." But the laugh died quickly, swallowed by the forest. Another hour passed, still no sign of a loop. By now, my unease had ballooned into full worry. I reached the top of a small rise and scanned the forest. Everywhere I looked, trees. No roads, no rooftops, no clearing, just endless green stretching forever. I tried my phone again. Dead battery. I must have left the screen on earlier when I checked the map, draining it. My heart sank. I had no compass, no working phone, no clear idea of where I was. The realization washed over me in a single, cold wave. I am lost. The word echoed in my skull louder than the birds, louder than the rustle of leaves. Lost. It wasn't supposed to happen to me. Not on a casual hike, not on a loop trail 2 hours from home. That kind of thing happened to careless people, people who didn't plan. I had planned, or at least I had thought I did. But there I was, alone, deep in the woods, and I didn't know how to get out. I tried to steady myself. Panicking would only make things worse. I took a sip of water, chewed half a granola bar, and forced myself to keep moving. Forward, 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 I told myself. The trail had to go somewhere. But as the shadows lengthened, doubt gnawed at me. The trees all looked the same. The trail twisted endlessly, never circling, never opening. And the silence? It changed. It wasn't just quiet anymore. It was watchful,
oppressive, like the forest itself was holding its breath. When a crow cawed overhead, I nearly screamed. I pushed faster, almost jogging now, heart pounding. My backpack dug into my shoulders, my throat dry. I kept telling myself, "You'll see the parking lot any minute. Just keep going. Just keep going." But when the sun began to tilt low in the sky, painting the forest in gold and shadow, I knew. I wasn't getting out before dark. And that was when the fear truly set in.
By the time I realized the light was truly fading, it was already too late to turn the day around. The forest doesn't ease you into darkness. It doesn't dim slowly like a room light on a dimmer switch. It snaps. One moment, there's a glow filtering through the branches, a warm gold that makes even the sharp edges look soft. The next, it's like the sun has been stolen. I stopped walking. My breath came ragged, my legs trembling. All around me, the trees blurred together into a wall of shadows. A sound bubbled out of me, half laugh, half sob. "Margaret," I whispered to myself, "you've really done it now." I didn't want to keep going deeper, but I didn't know how to turn back either. Each step I took, I pictured the same path stretching behind me, infinite and cruel, leading nowhere but in circles. That's when the real fear bloomed. I might not find my way out. Not tonight, not tomorrow, maybe not ever. I forced myself to think. My husband, David, knew I had come here. If I didn't make it back, he'd eventually call for help. But eventually might be too late. The forest could swallow a person whole in hours. I had to survive the night. I scanned the ground for a place to stop. There was a rise where an old oak tree leaned sideways, its roots curling out like gnarled hands. It wasn't shelter, not really, but it was something. I shrugged off my backpack and sat beneath it. The silence was no longer silence. At night, the woods changed their voice. Crickets began their high-pitched symphony. Frogs croaked in the unseen distance. Somewhere, an owl called, long, mournful. Every sound pricked my nerves raw. I hugged my knees, listening, jumping at every crack of a twig. And then, footsteps. Not mine. I froze. They were faint at first, crunching leaves, deliberate and steady, coming closer. My mind raced. Another hiker? A rescuer? Or something else? I wanted to call out, but my throat locked. The sound of the steps grew louder. My heart hammered so hard I swore it would give me away. I peered into the dark, and there, between the trees, I saw it. Not a person, not a bear, a shape, broad, tall, moving with a slow, heavy rhythm. For one awful second, I thought it was a moose, but as it stepped into a shaft of moonlight, I saw the truth. It was a horse. A horse, in the middle of the forest. I blinked, certain I was hallucinating. My breath caught. Its mane glowed pale in the moonlight, its chest broad, muscles shifting beneath a coat the color of storm clouds. It stood just yards away, watching me. And then it snorted, loud, sudden, breaking the night. I gasped, clutching my chest. My laugh was half hysterical. "You scared the hell out of me." But the relief was immediate, strange, almost absurd. A horse wasn't a threat, at least not like a predator. A horse meant something human, somewhere nearby. I stood slowly, careful not to spook it.
"Hey there," I whispered. My voice trembled. "Where did you come from?" The horse flicked its ears, stepped closer, nostrils flaring. Its hooves pressed into the soil with soft thuds. I reached out a cautious hand. My palm brushed its muzzle. Warm, real, solid. For the first time all day, I didn't feel entirely alone. The horse lingered with me, shifting its weight, snorting softly, as if considering me. "Are you lost too?" I murmured. It didn't answer, of course, but when I sat back down, it stayed. It lowered its head to graze, calm, steady, a living presence that kept the shadows from closing in too tight. I don't know how long we sat like that, me under the tree, the horse cropping grass nearby, but slowly, despite my fear, my eyes grew heavy, and for the first time in hours, I allowed myself to sleep.